Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead and I'm coming to you with another video in the 2025 Every Bit Counts Challenge. This is the food preservation challenge that we do every August both here on YouTube and on Instagram. And the goal of the challenge is to preserve something every day of the month, no matter how small. It could be as simple as just gathering some herbs from the garden to get them hanging, or any kind of canning project, freeze drying, lacto fermenting, or something like just gathering some food from the garden that you want to get curing in your root cellar, or taking after it's done curing and getting it into storage. But the goal is to take a step every day of the month to further build your pantry into something that can help provide you with food through the winter when you might not be able to grow fresh food. So in this video, I'm going to bring you what I was able to accomplish this week, leaving out some of the duplicate recipes that I've already shown you in the previous weeks. So we're going to can some tomato juice. We're going to do a white chicken chili base. We're also going to do a regular tomato-based chili base, and we're going to cure some onions. So let's get started. So the garden is in peak productivity right now. The summer garden is churning out tomatoes and peppers and beans. We've got okra. We've got blackberries right now, just a ton of different stuff. And here's just a sampling of the rainbow of goodies that we have available this time of year. And we're also working on planting the fall garden. But let's focus first on tomatoes because they're starting to come in small batches. This isn't my best tomato year ever. We're fighting blight and hornworm damage, but we are getting enough to do small little harvests like this to do canning projects. So this first project I want to do is make some tomato juice. So let me show you how I can that. We're going to start by thoroughly washing all of our tomatoes here, and these are mostly Roma tomatoes. We have a couple different varieties we're growing, but Roma tomatoes are usually my favorite for canning purposes. So I'm just chopping off the tops of each tomato and any bad spots that I might find, and we're just going to toss them into a pot. We are going to cook them down with the skins on first, and then later on we're going to run them through a mill to remove the skins and seeds before we can them. If I had a much larger batch of tomatoes to do, I would probably get out my electric roaster because it's probably double the size of this pot and I could fill it. But since we're just doing a small batch, I'm just going to do this on the stove today. And since we're making a juice that doesn't need to cook down for a long time, this is something that's easy to accomplish on my stove in the kitchen. So we have them all chopped up like this. I added a little bit of water to the bottom of the pot so that these tomatoes don't burn and stick while they're beginning to simmer. Now, once they've simmered and softened enough, I'm going to run them through this old-fashioned food mill. This was a gift of an elderly friend of mine who used to do some canning and things, and she gave it to me, and it's my absolute favorite thing to use to do things like tomato sauce or applesauce or anything like that. And before I continue, don't mind Miss Hannah here with her beautiful makeup. She found a tube of mascara that was left within her reach and decided to put it on herself. And she looks so beautiful, so we just kind of let her leave it on after we told her that she shouldn't be getting into those things again. So if you're wondering why she looks like that, she's just having a wonderful day, feeling very good about herself with her makeup. So back to the tomato sauce. This is my favorite tool. It's really easy. They sell all sorts of fancy food mills that are electric. They even have attachments that can go on things like your KitchenAid. But I love this mill because it's really fun to use and easy. And whenever I get it out, no doubt a child is going to ask to help. I was working on this sauce all by myself in the kitchen, and as soon as Elizabeth saw me doing it, she said, "Hey, can I do that for you?" She really enjoys it. So you can see that the juice or the sauce falls through the holes in the mill, and then what is left behind are all of the skins and the seeds and any other solids. And you could dehydrate or freeze dry those skins and seeds to make a tomato powder that can be used to turn into tomato paste later, or you can feed it to your animals. That's what we did today. We fed it to the chickens, but I have many times before made dried tomato powder out of those skins. If we were doing a much larger batch, I might cook this down and thicken it up a little bit to turn it into a sauce. But since we had this small amount, I went ahead and canned it as tomato juice, which I might need quarts of tomato juice in some recipes, so this will be useful to add to the pantry shelves. And so we're filling up our quart jars, and then we also had a pint jar here, and that was all that batch of tomatoes turned into. And to safely water bath can tomato juice, we are going to need to add some extra acid. I choose to use citric acid. You could also use lemon juice if you prefer not to use citric acid. We want to do 1/4 of a teaspoon per pint jar or 1/2 of a teaspoon per quart jar. And that just ensures that your tomato juice is going to be acidic enough to safely water bath can. And you do want that acid in there because that is what's going to prevent any botulism spores from turning into the toxin that could make you sick. And water bath canning is only for acidic foods that have to be at a pH level that is safe and will inhibit the growth of that toxin. And the citric acid helps ensure that. I like to use citric acid because it doesn't taste super acidic after it's canned. Some people prefer lemon juice, whatever you like to do to ensure that acidity. And then when you're all done, you want to wipe the rims of your jars just to make sure everything is nice and clean, and you'll get a good seal from your lid. Also, taking the time to do this carefully will help you see if there are any little nicks or marks on the rim of your jar that could also prevent a good seal with your lid. I have found broken spots on the rims of my jars before, and I was so grateful I took the time to clean it and found it before I put it through the canner. Next, we're ready to get those lids on our jars. We're using 4 jars canning lids, and if you guys would like 10% off some really high quality canning lids, check out the link in this video description and use my code 3rivers10 and you can get 10% off. So we've got our lids on. Now we're just going to add the rings, and quarts of tomato juice need to be in the water bath canner for 40 minutes. Once it reaches a rolling boil, set your timer for 40 minutes, and when you're done, you'll have tomato juice. That separation of the solids and the liquids is absolutely normal. Just shake up your jar later on and it will all come back together. My next preservation goal for the week was to work on using up some of the hot peppers that we have accumulating in the kitchen. I have some habaneros, we have lots of banana peppers. The cayennes aren't quite ready yet, but we're accumulating a lot of hot peppers, and we don't use them a lot in fresh eating. There are some salsas and things that I'll use them for, but for the most part, I grow these for my canning projects like this. So it was time to get busy. We're gonna make a white chicken chili base. So you can see how many peppers I have here. You could use as many as you want, whatever types of peppers that you like. It just, depends on the spice level that you want. We're just going to put a little bit of spice in the bottom of these jars. And so I've got my banana peppers and my habaneros chopped up there. Now we're going to add some cumin. I'm doing 1 teaspoon of cumin per jar. Next, we're going to add our oregano. I'm doing about 1/2 teaspoon of oregano per jar. And then we're going to add our chili powder. And we're also going to do 1 teaspoon of chili powder per jar. And then we're going to add our salt, also 1 teaspoon per jar. You can add any spices you want in your white chicken chili. It isn't going to affect the safety of the recipe. Spice it up however you would like, add whatever vegetables you want, and then after you do that, we're going to add our chicken. This is just chunked chicken. It is raw. It will cook through the canning process, and we're going to go ahead and fill up our jars. Now, since we're filling our jars more than halfway with this meat, these are technically going to be considered a meat product and not necessarily a soup. And so these are going to process in the pressure canner for 90 minutes because that is the time for meat in a pressure canner. And then once we put our meat in there, we're going to fill them with water, leaving 1-inch headspace. We will go in and debubble the jars and then adjust to make sure it still maintains 1 inch headspace. So add as much meat as you want, as little as you want. You could put chicken broth in here. I'm just putting water and it will turn into kind of a meat stock as it pressure cans. Then we're going to go ahead and do our jar prep. And so these, like I said, are a white chicken chili base. That means that this isn't the whole meal. When we open one of these jars and want to make a pot of white chicken chili, I will also add a quart of Great Northern beans, maybe a little extra, another quart of chicken broth if I want to, or I could add another whole quart of chicken. It's just a starter for the meal with all of the spices and flavorings, and then you can add whatever extra protein that you want. I love having these on the pantry shelves. They make a really convenient, quick lunch during the winter when I'm busy homeschooling. So now let's move on to another type of chili base. Let's go ahead and do tomato-based chili base. We are going to use a mix of all different types of tomatoes. I have way too many snacking tomatoes because there are only 4 people in my house that actually like to snack on tomatoes. Adam, myself, David, and Levi. We all love tomatoes. The rest of the family, they aren't great fans, and I always plant way too many snacking tomato plants. So I end up just kind of throwing those into the pot with the rest of them. And then we're going to use the same process we used for the tomato juice to go ahead and strain out and make a tomato sauce that we can use to make our white chicken chili. I grabbed more of these hot peppers that I'm trying to use up. I also grabbed some onions that were curing down in the cellar, and we're going to get busy getting these prepped for the jars. So I just peeled the onions. Next, I'm going to take the tops off of my peppers. And I told you in my last video that my food processor is broken, and it is still broken, so we're going to make do and just use my immersion blender to get all of this chopped up. I was not in the mood to chop a bunch of onions and hot peppers and cry on this afternoon, so this is just a really easy way to do it without risking, touching all of those hot peppers and things. We're just basically making a spicy onion slurry to put in the bottom of our jars. The onion and the hot pepper are for flavor. We don't necessarily need the texture of that in our chili. I'm going to go ahead and divide the contents of that bowl evenly amongst all of those pint jars, and now we're going to get busy adding our seasonings. You can add whatever seasonings you like in your chili. It's not going to affect the safety of this recipe and make a difference. So you have some liberty there to do whatever you want. Now this is going to seem like a lot of spice for a tiny little pint jar, and it is, but remember these are a chili base. The flavorings in here are going to be diluted when you add extra ingredients later on when you're preparing your chili. So we did a whole tablespoon of chili powder. We did a tablespoon of cumin. I'm doing a half a tablespoon of paprika and a half a tablespoon of salt. Now we're going to fill these the rest of the way with our tomato juice sauce. You can make this as thick as you want that we had working over on the stove. And then of course we're going to mix the contents together, adjust the headspace, get it back to 1 inch headspace, and these are going to be ready to go. Just like with the white chicken chili, when you want to make a pot of this tomato-based chili, you can add as many quarts of beans as you want. Add a quart or 2 of beef or cook up some fresh ground beef. You can add some extra broth or tomato sauce, however you like to have your chili. This is just like a concentrated flavor bomb in this pint jar that saves you the time of having to chop all the onions and the hot peppers and do all that. This is a meal that I can whip together in about 10 minutes for my hungry children on a cold winter day. I'll probably end up doing 6 or 7 batches of this at least so that we have enough to get us through the year with more tomatoes later on in the month. And so these are going to go in the pressure canner because it's considered soup, a pint of soup. It's going to be pressure canned for 60 minutes. And the reason these can't be safely water bath canned, they're not acidic enough because they have all of that vegetable in there. They're different than salsa where you might have added some lemon juice or vinegar or something like that. So we did some other canning projects this week, but they were repeats from previous week's videos. So let's move on to something different. We are going to go ahead and harvest our red onions for the year. I didn't grow very many red onions this year, and we have been slowly harvesting them for fresh eating throughout the year. But I was ready to get the rest of these cleared out of this bed so that I can prep it to plant radishes. I think I'm going to put radishes in this bed for the fall. It needs weeded and some compost added to that soil. Get it all ready. And next week, I think I'm going to get this bed planted. So John and Elizabeth helped me pull the rest of these red onions, and we need to get them curing down in the cellar the way that we had cured our storage onions, our Patterson onions, earlier in the month. So it's not the largest harvest ever, but it will be enough to meet all of our salsa eating needs throughout the rest of the summer here, now that we have tomatoes and hot peppers and everything else that we need to make salsa. My kids love to have tortilla chips and salsa as a snack. And then anything that's left, we will probably do a small batch of pickled red onions, and I'll bring you those in another video before the end of the month. So this is our little curing area down in the cellar. You can see that our Patterson onions are all dried up and ready to go. So we're going to get those out of the way here, and then we'll spread these red onions out. We have a fan down here blowing on this little shelving unit, and it's the perfect spot kind of out of the way to get all of these dried and ready for storage. You do have to cure them, and that is a process of drying the outer layers of the onion. And you can see that the greens on the top of the onion have dried out. And now that they're dry, we can cut those off. And then we're just going to put our onions here into a box and then decide how we want to store them for the rest of the year. So there's a lot of different ways that you could store your onions. You just want to make sure that they have good airflow. So a lot of people do that. If you didn't cut the greens off that I'm cutting off, you could take them and braid them. And I've done videos before on how to braid things like onions and garlic, and I will link one in the video description for you. If you don't want to hang an onion braid, you could put them in a mesh basket or some kind of wooden basket that has holes on the side that would give you airflow. Even a cardboard box like this, if it was in a small layer and they're not all piled on top of each other, would work. What you don't want to do is seal them up in something like a plastic bag. That is going to contribute to rot in your onions and just not preserve them the best way. So what I like to do, we're going to take these upstairs and I'm going to show you. We have these plastic mesh bags. I bought them in bulk. I did a huge bulk buying of them maybe 5 years ago, and we are still using these every year for things like onions and garlic. So they're very affordable and effective for the job. I got them on Amazon, and I'll link them in the video description. And I just like to portion out maybe 10 to 12 onions of varying sizes, some larger, some smaller, and tie them off in a bag. We'll hang them back down in the cellar, and then throughout the year, whenever I need onions, I can run down and grab a bag and bring it up. And that's just a really easy way for me to do it instead of having to run downstairs and grab a few onions every time I need them for a meal. I mentioned in my onion harvest video that my onions were not huge this year. These are not the largest onions I've ever grown, but they will get the job done. So what I'm doing is taking some of the larger ones to put in storage bags, and the smaller ones we're setting aside to use for my canning projects for the rest of the year. So I still have some salsas and tomato sauce and some soups that I need to make that will use onion. And so that's what I like to do with the teeny tiny ones. So you'll see when we're done here, what is left in the box will be used for canning, and everything that I put in the red bags will go back down in the cellar to enjoy for fresh eating and all of my other recipes throughout the rest of the year. So this is what we were able to accomplish this week. I hope all of you are enjoying the Every Bit Counts challenge and you are being as productive in your garden and your kitchen as we feel like we've been here. It's such a fun time of year, taking all of the harvest from the work you've done in your garden and getting it put into some kind of form that will feed your family throughout the winter months. So make sure you're following the hashtag here on YouTube, or if you're on Instagram, there is an account named Every Bit Counts Challenge, and I'm having so much fun seeing all of the creative ways that people are preserving their food. I learn something new every year from following along on this challenge. So thank you for this community and everybody who is participating. You guys are the best. We'll be back next week, friends. Until then, I hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy these last weeks of summer, and we will see you back here next Sunday. Bye.